For many artists in the digital art space, it is the holy grail, a way of turning digital art into physical art in a credible way. Today, we're very excited to welcome Artmatr to the show, who are on the cutting edge of pen and paint plotting technologies. Artist Journal, June 28th, 2023, broadcasting live from Berlin and New York City on Rug Radio via Twitter Spaces. My name is Adrian Pocabelli, and we welcome back co-host, artist, and conversationalist to the show, Rune Toon. Rune, how is your week going?
Good morning.
Good morning.
My week has been going great. I spent the weekend visiting friends in Miami, so I'm back. I'm refreshed. I needed to get a little, take a little break from New York for a minute, and I am ready.
Well, Miami, I mean, sometimes in Europe, I feel like we have it pretty good, and we do, but Miami does sound like a pretty nice trip. I bet it's pretty reasonable. How are plane fares these days going from New York to Miami?
Well, they're not as cheap as they used to be, but it's still not bad. I think my round trip flight was roughly $250 to $270, something like that.
Not terrible.
Not terrible, but it's, every now and then, I mean, I remember back in the day, you could get sometimes they'd have those last minute flights for like $70.
Exactly. Those are becoming less and less common out here as well. It's funny, especially in Berlin. I mean, if you go to London, you still get those like 40 euro flights that turn into like maybe 80 or 90 euros after your bag and all this sort of stuff. But out of Berlin, it's actually gotten quite expensive. So very fascinating. Well, I don't want to waste any time. I am so thrilled to have Ox Eye is here, and I believe Benjamin is with Artmatr as well. Guys, welcome to the show, and thank you for coming on.
Hey, Adrian. Thanks so much for having us.
Okay.
Super psyched to be here. And congrats on Artist Journal 200. I saw that you just passed that milestone. It's super exciting.
Well, thank you. It's all kind of surreal for me because it's just like right now I'm talking to a laptop. And it's funny, I had to do some public speaking about like 6 months ago, and I was like, oh yeah, no problem. And then you're facing 100 beating hearts, and you're like, oh geez, I can't catch my breath all of a sudden. So it's interesting, and thank you. I totally appreciate that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have basically the same experience. I kind of hate public speaking, but I always felt comfortable and calm in Twitter Spaces. It's a different way of interacting with a large group of people, for sure.
It sure is. Like, it's strangely relaxed. It's like there's none of the physiological aspects to public speaking, and I want to get better at like the actual physical public speaking, but nevertheless. And so I assume Benjamin is out there too, and he is with Artmatr. Is that right?
Correct. I'm here. Thank you so much for having us. Really excited to
Well,
chat with you guys.
I, I'm absolutely thrilled, and I think it's real credit to you guys that you guys are coming on here. I mean, we're just some artists hanging out here, and I think it's awesome that you guys are coming on. And I got to say, like, I listened to Twitter Spaces with you guys maybe, I don't know, 2 months ago, 6 weeks ago, and I was totally floored at how almost philosophical the whole discussion was. Like, it was a very deep discussion. You guys, so okay, so I could wax on here forever, but I want to hear what you guys have to say. Um, and so maybe actually first, Ben, I'll start with you. What is your role at Artmatr? And then Oxai, I'll turn to you, just so people have a clue.
Yeah. So I actually founded Artmatr 8 years ago at MIT. And although started at MIT, I am actually the farthest thing from an engineer. I started off most of my career just in fine art as a painter and as a teacher. I co-founded a school, an art kind of academic painting school early on in Jerusalem in 1998, where I taught for 7 years. And my background is, at least in terms of a teaching methodology, was teaching the old masters, like copying old master paintings in museums. And I never wanted to teach people to try and behave like a 17th century artist on the one hand, but I also wanted people to be able to grasp the fundamental kind of building blocks of the great traditions of art. And it was just this kind of process of being an artist over these decades, the past 20, 30 years, where every creative space has been transformed by digital tech, one after the other, with painting being probably the one exception. And it was just FOMO. It was just like frustration that so much transition was happening in the creative spaces, not in painting. And I went out on kind of a massive research campaign to see what was out there. Ended up at MIT, and we started basically prototyping painting machines to allow people to go from the digital to the physical in a much more natural, creative way than just what printers could offer. And so we just started. I started pulling together engineers from every corner that was relevant. Mechanical engineering, software, AI, physics, material science, across the board. And we just started doing this, got the attraction of many of the world's leading artists, traditional artists. But then, of course, we knew even back then that the future was really in digital, like obviously way before NFTs, that the future was just in digital art. That's where the talent is. It's where the interesting tech is. So from the beginning, I was really thinking about how to build a platform for the kind of wave of creatives and creators that are coming out of the digital imaging space from every sector, and allow them to make paintings.
Well, it sounds like $1 billion idea to me. I mean, it's like, FOMO is almost a great way of putting it. Like when I see those little videos that you guys post on your Twitter feed there, on the Art Matter Twitter feed, it's just like I feel instant FOMO, like if I could only get my hands on that machine. So when you started, I assume there was pen plotting before, and I'll turn to Oxai in a second here, but I assume there was pen plotting before, just to get a little bit more background. Uh, or were you the first? Like, tell me just a little bit of what that was like and where the technology was when you kind of started. And I love just finally how you felt it important to understand the techniques of the old masters. I as well went for 2 weeks to the Academy of Realist Art for 2 times. And it makes all the difference in the world when you kind of understand how a painting is made. It kind of demystifies it a little bit. So, anyways, just a little bit more on what it was like when you were starting. I assume the pen plotter technology was already out there or not?
Yeah, 100%. The plotters have been around for ages, and lots of mechanical techniques for drawing go back hundreds of years. But it was, I was really interested to see how to make use of existing technologies in more creative ways, everything from plotting to high-end digital printing, and also see what things might look like with emerging tech. And so what we did is we looked at some of those building blocks as you were describing with the old masters. Like it is demystifying it. It is showing that no matter how complex this final work of art you're seeing is, it's made up of a bunch of brush marks. That's it, right? And they came up with a methodology for both conceiving of what those marks should look like and how to put them down. And a mechanical process, an automated process is not so different. Just need to get really good at making marks. And so plotters were limited by, as they are now still, with the end effector, the tool on the end. There's only so much you can do with a pen or a watercolor brush. So I wanted to take the brush, what I'm calling the brush, the end effector, and create things that were fully computational in a way that a bristle brush probably can't ever be. And so inkjet heads and different types of extruding tools were the answer, because all of the dispensing of the ink or the paint can be measured extremely carefully. It's just the way that printers have been designed for the industry is anti-creative. They don't allow you to open them up and really understand how to reinvent them. So I started pulling together people from the inkjet industry, really like some of the world's leading experts, and looking at projects like outside of MIT, in the University of Konstanz, where they were building a robotic painting machine using a visual feedback mechanism and a little bit of AI. And that was a kind of a precursor to a lot of the stuff you're seeing now in the AI imaging space. But there was some research out there, mostly in Europe, by the way. It was in Germany, it was in Cambridge, it was in the University of Delft. I think these are the places that had the kind of painting traditions a little bit in their veins, in their DNA. So it was easier for them to look at this from a technology perspective, but it was still in the realm of computer science, not in the realm of art. Like, they weren't building tools for artists. They were looking at robotics and looking at digital imaging and using painting as a way to do that. So we just went across the globe, found anyone that was interested in the space or already building stuff or doing research. And I literally made contact with them, and in certain cases brought my students from MIT to them for like these short residencies to work together.
Well, absolutely fascinating. And I love the almost academic, it is academic in a sense, like the background to this. As you're saying, it was almost more of a computer science robotics exercise with art. It's so interesting. I mean, it's like, I almost have these distant analogies in my head that it's kind of like, here we have this blockchain technology, and it seems like one of the most biggest use cases is digital art of all things, which is kind of ironic. Oksai, welcome to the show. So tell us a little bit about how you got involved with Artmatr and just a little bit about yourself.
Sure, yeah. I've been around the space for a while. I kind of joined the NFT sphere in late 2020. Got drawn in by generative art, as so many of us were, and got pulled into the early days of art blocks and all of the excitement that followed there. And then discovered Nunk in its first week through some of the artists that I had been having conversations with from the art blocks roster, and kind of went, just had an aha moment when I found Tezos art and just went all in on Tezos. So I've been a collector and commentator, curator, and then eventually an artist in the space, I guess, for the entire history of art on Tez. And ran into art block. I've been a pen plotter, tinkerer, and artist for the last 8 years as well. So, familiar with utilizing machines to reify digital art, and ran into a couple weirdos down at Art Basel last year in Miami. There was an event for the Buffalo AKG Museum, and there was these strange guys hanging out in the corner over by the water at this beautiful gala they were having, and they had a pen plotting robot. It was like a little rover that they'd built, and they were making marks on paper while everyone was drinking expensive champagne, and I naturally gravitated over there and started talking to them. And a month later, I was working there. So I've been a project manager and sort of Web3 product developer for Artmatr this year.
Fascinating. And I love how entrepreneurial and enterprising the whole thing is. Improvisation, you see someone at a party, you're working there. a month later. I mean, one of the things that really, I guess, excite me about the whole pen plotting in the big picture from a wide angle view is this randomness. Like it really, I like the marks that the pen plotter makes better than I think if a human did it. It's more precise, yet it still retains the randomness. Is that basically what you also like about the pen plotter? And did you, in a sense, have FOMO as soon as you saw it, Oxide, that I want to use this to
Yeah.
input my art on this pen plotter?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's something, I mean, I think about this a lot and I've had a number of conversations with other people in the space about it. So I'm interested in kind of hearing what you think and playing, spooling the idea out a little bit more here, which is there's something about the centrality of randomness in algorithmic art that that makes it fascinating to us. Like the way the natural order of the world, whether that's biological or geological, sort of displays elements of stochasticism or randomness is what we find pleasing or interesting or beautiful, or sometimes even like spiritually uplifting about these forms of order. And in algorithmic art, that's sort of leveraged or exploited or explored in a way where those types of order can emerge, and then you add another layer on top of it. You take this already, you're already starting with this exploration of randomness, and then you add another translation, which is the sort of pushing it into the physical realm with these tools which are imperfect, with inks and chemistry, which is has its own types of imperfection and ways of altering an image. The paper and capillary action of the fibers, and you add this another layer on top of that, another meta of what the natural world can produce. And I think that's just, to me, that's what sucks me in. And I think it's a really interesting way for algorithmic artists to find additional territory in their exploration. And I think Ben was kind of talking about how he had this sort of reductive process, breaking down how old masters work, taking a masterpiece and turning it into what is basically an instruction set, a series of marks. But I think there's also something, and maybe that sort of reductive explanation maybe sounds like you're taking the magic out of something, but ultimately I think there's a space where you push far enough into it, and you start to have these new emergent properties appear. And I think that's what we're discovering at Artmatr is that we build these machines, we prototype these tools, and we bring in artists, natively digital artists, and they find new stuff. They find new parts of their practice to explore. And to me, that's the really amazing part.
That's fascinating. So, quick story on just how I found out about Matter is I first found out about you guys through a show at the Hole in New York City by Matthew Stone. And we've talked about this artist and that show on our spaces before. But I remember going through the gallery, and he uses AI. He feeds AI, like Stable Diffusion, photos of his artwork and makes new iterations of what would be his own artwork using AI. And it's these really unusual, like impossible sorts of images that would be really hard to get with, a paintbrush and all of that. And makes these digital prints. And there was one particular print in the show that he did with the help of you guys. And it was the only one in the show where I just completely fumbled how it was made. I was like, I have no idea how this is made, because it had those impossible, mark making things that he created through AI, but it had this physicality to it as if it was a oil painting. And I remember talking to the person at the gallery there, and they pointed me to you guys. But what's funny is, like, even when I found out, oh, he was using these really cool machines and robots and this totally new technology, there was a sense that this wasn't just something that he came up with, that he had you guys make for him, that there was a collaborative effort there. And I think, right off the get, I understood that you guys aren't just like fabricators for people's stuff or their creative ideas. The artists come to you and you work together. How would you describe that process?
That's a fantastic question. And to be totally frank with you, it's something that we're kind of figuring out. Um, there's we are a company founded by artists, and sometimes the best thing to do with an artist is back up, kind of present some limitations and let them find amazing ways, not despite of that, but like through those limitations. Sometimes we need to be full on creative partner, and the both design of the tools themselves and the production that we do with the artists is always a negotiation, to figure out kind of how to best serve the people that we're working with. So there isn't one way, but with Matthew Stone, he was someone that I reached out to almost in the very beginning days because he was using printing already, or trying to, and his composition of these works was done with this combination of 2D and 3D modeling software, and it was just a fascinating approach that was clearly entirely based on this transition between digital and physical. And I saw almost him as a paradigm for a new type of art making, that it doesn't exist either in one space. It's this hybrid. And we started looking at processes together, and that work that was in the hole, that was actually an unfinished work. Last minute, they said, "Can we show this?" Sure, 100%. It was something that we did totally remote. It was never in the lab physically, and we were taking his essentially the files that he put together and building translation tools to match his vision, or that's inherent in the digital files, or take it farther. So that is what you're looking on. What you're looking at in that painting is actually oil paint on canvas, no different than anything else. And it mimics certain effects of traditional painting, but it was applied in a totally different way. We're first looking at the topography of the painting, and then kind of putting the color on top. So it's going through brush marks in like a two-step process instead of a one-step process. But we're looking at ways to build that topography, the the volumetric quality of the paint, directly into the imaging process in the beginning. So you're kind of sculpting with paint in this, it's like using the digital tools in a way that is natural for the digital side, and trying to build a direct translation to the physical. So it's borrowing from some aspects of traditional art. It's using existing tech, both on digital and physical, but thinking about new ways to explore it as a new creative medium. And that's this method that Matthew and I, or us, are really creative partners in designing this new type of artistic medium. I don't know how else to say it.
You know how I would say it. It's what's so exciting, really, about this, and I just want to echo everything you said. It's like new forms of mark making, right? And then you have this whole contrast between, this mechanical ability to kind of stay in the lines, for lack of a better term, but then you still keep that randomness as if a human made it. So again, no human would be that precise. So we're really going into new territory here, and it's incredibly exciting. And so, and what I love about what you guys are doing is I see kind of a bit of a, for lack of a better term, aggression in how you're pursuing these new mediums. You're not just sort of sitting back and saying, okay, we made a fantastic pen plotter here and we're good. You're making oil paintings, you're using charcoal. So maybe, Ben, if you could give us an update here on where are we with this whole thing? Like if I present an image, for example, if I present an AI image, and then now you can see these brush marks in AI, say in a strange thing or whatever, and then those can even be interpreted by Blender. Can you guys like emulate that yet? It seems like you can, but help me out.
Yeah, again, I love your questions. we've been working from the very beginning with kind of small sliver of, for lack of a better term, like blue chip artists, and the this it's been great from the point of view of having people that obviously have the means to pay for pretty expensive engineering feats, but also have these chops, artistic chops that they've built up over decades, and they have they have these workflows that we can borrow and build into the tools. On the other hand, those things also have limitations because they're used to doing things in a certain way. And so we've been opening up our tool set to redesigning the tools to sort of mimic people's behaviors that have been done manually for, in most cases, decades, and trying to sort of retrofit that. But it was a heavy lift, right? Because we're trying to reverse engineer something that was developed by humans over a period of time and then automate it. As we go on, we're trying to take the learnings from that and turn it into a much tighter set of tools that are designed based on from the experience we've had with these artists, to build a small subset of those capabilities, basically limit the capabilities that we have on it in a way that they're designed to give the most benefit to the most number of people. So really go from working with a small group of artists to working with a much larger group, really like more mainstream set of not just painters, but anyone, like literally anyone from the digital space that's interested in making paintings who want to build the capabilities to translate their imagination directly into mattered form, as we say. So, long story short, what do we have? We do have a set of brushes, digital brushes, from drawing tools to actual brushes to inkjet heads to mechanical airbrushes, all these things that we can mix and match on our tools. We're also building something, and we still do some of that, but we're also building something that internally we call the plotter farm, which is a racks of these 5 by 5 foot machines that have obviously drawing tools on them. They also have some painting tools. Two specifically. One is a digital airbrush that we can control much faster, much more precise than a normal airbrush. We actually built that and patented that ourselves. And then the next thing that it's not on there yet, but it will be soon, is a vector-based inkjet head. So what this is a, if you can imagine, a new version of a brush. A brush has, let's say, thousands of bristles. An inkjet head has thousands of nozzles, roughly about the same width. The advantage of having an inkjet head using nozzles is that each single one can be programmed. That can fire hundreds of times a second. So it's like having programmable bristles, if you will. And when that thing rotates just like a brush, then we can program it. We can take people's hand movements from an iPad or even from real life, with a brush, and then translate that to those kinds of tools. So we're building a few of these things, like 3, maybe 4 tools, but max, that on the plotter farm. And we're going to open that up to a broad user base, so anyone can come in and use it remotely. Of course, people can come still into come into the lab, and we love that. But we want to open this up to anyone anywhere around the world that's interested to be able to have a really great physical experience through their tablet, through their laptop, through their Vision Pro glasses, whatever it is, coming up in the future. And obviously the digital toolkit is going to match that to provide a kind of one-to-one, so people can easily program the files and then execute them and hopefully watch it real time.
Wow.
Or watch it right after.
So you're thinking like live. Is that, if I understand you right?
That is my goal, to
Wow.
have people be able to access it via live stream, so they can work real time with. We already do that with a lot of artists. We just need to figure out how to do this at scale. So like really the vision for the company is to be able to, without sounding too hyperbolic, or maybe I am sounding hyperbolic.
I was going to say,
it
go
is.
for it. Go for it.
Fine. Literally changing the creative habits of people across, like, over around the globe. And I say that because one, we've now built a system that can scale. We can, with the right investments, we can build thousands of these, all over the world, and have easy access for people. They can use them remotely, and they can start to really create paintings and inhabit the tools like you inhabit a studio. That's what I'm really dying to create. So having that live stream, that real time connection with the tools, I think is absolutely key.
So, in essence, correct me if I'm wrong, essentially, it would be via live stream. Someone could be drawing digitally from computer, tablet, whatever, and the tools in your lab would be crafting. Is that what you're describing?
That's exactly right. And just like on digital painting software, you can choose your brush. Same thing on our UI. You can choose the substrate you want to paint on. You can choose once you choose that digital brush, you have the physical representation. You can see it play out. And when we've done these projects with people like Tyler Hobbs, Zancan, where we have these paintings that are happening over 30, 40 hours, and we're live streaming, and they're popping in and even updating the code real time based on what they're seeing. So it is like literally directly translating their imagination and their intent instead of using their hand. It's their quote unquote hand is translated through our software. But it is still the artist's DNA. It is still totally unique. There's still the same kind of discovery and excitement and exploration, and what Joshua said in terms of those emergent qualities. That's of course what we're after, and that's what we've built into the toolkit.
Yeah, I mean, like what I think you had originally pointed at, Adrian, or maybe started to point at, is that sort of complex or fraught relationship between collaborator and fabricator, or like the dynamic between those two sorts of categories. And I don't think it's what we're doing isn't anything new. There's always been technology and like technical expertise behind great artists' production, right? Like I'm thinking of maybe EAT, or Experiments in Art Technology, which was founded by Robert Rauschenberg and Bell Labs back in the late 60s, and like the way that sort of catalyst focused environment really led to an explosion in technical creativity among artists in the 70s. Or even like Talix, which was the metal foundry that Louise Bourgeois and Sarah and I think even Koons used, located upstate New York. But like there's always people that are helping open doors for artists. And it's not as if everything we do is one-to-one collaboration with artists. But I think what Ben's pointing at is we're trying to expand that territory for not just blue chip artists, but for anyone with an internet connection and some digital art expertise.
Well, I think it's a noble goal. And on that point that you bring up all these, blue chip artists and the contemporary art scene, I imagine some of them have reached out. I mean, Oxai, have you heard from people, that, famous contemporary artists? I assume they're reaching out to you.
Yeah, I mean, we're working with Redacted and also Redacted, and then we've actually got a project on the Plotter Farm right now for Redacted. That's about all I can say. But no, it's I joke. It's we're getting some good interest. There's sort of two camps that we work with. Obviously, the digitally native artists that from like very code fluent people like Tyler, who can like get down and dirty with the machines that are working on G code level, and like are really comfortable having complex conversations with the hardware tech. To artists that are not not code native, but are open to that sort of exploration or utilizing some of our translation layers, like what Ben was talking about. Like we're building this UI UX, which is constantly evolving, that can permit people with different levels of fluency in digital art creation to have this sort of experience, and that includes creating simulations as well, like having a simulation environment. I think one of the things about making work physical from digital art is that I think it slows down the process for most people. Like digital art iterations, you can build an algorithmic project and hit generate and get, whatever 10,000 different outputs in moments, and so that's like a very very fast way of like moving through artistic exploration. But you want to make 10,000 different pen plots, it's going to take you a little while. So one of the things that we're doing is building a simulation environment where you can import digital art, whether that's algorithmic or raster based or whatever, and then start to simulate what different physical mark making tools, what those tools would actually result in if you were to then engage the reification on the machines. And so you can kind of parse through different tools, parse through different options and chemistries quickly in a simulated environment before you actually commit to the 10 or 40 hours of machine production.
Right. Like I assume costs become an issue, right? I mean, it's like so different from digital art where you basically pay your $10 for Procreate and you're good to go. With physical materials, I mean, this stuff costs money. If you're going to like print out some big painting with oil paint, and then what kind of materials are you going to use? That can cost you hundreds of dollars, maybe more, depending on everything. So this virtual, I assume that's why you guys went in that direction.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's about being able to let artists innovate without that sort of sunk costs of, I mean, not just the paint and canvas or panel or whatever it is. I mean, it's the machine time. Ultimately, it's the most expensive thing. It costs about $7,000 just an overhead per day for these machines, So, running up, some of like Tyler's work that we did for the Pace Show, those things were running for almost 2 days to make one piece. And that's assuming, everything went perfectly and we didn't have to start over.
Incredible. Just absolutely incredible. So, Ben, just turning to you then, as far as being the founder, how do you scale this up? Because, you talk about live painting and everything and, opening this up to the world. Again, very noble goal. And I think basically everybody in this space is probably dying to find out. But how do you scale up this business? I mean, there you are, $7,000 for, how does that work in your mind?
It's obviously something that is, the core of what we're trying to figure out. There's never an easy answer. But I'm starting, there's a lot of kind of boring technical stuff that I won't go into, but we'll spare you that, even though I would happily do it. But the larger vision is I actually spent all of these years and all like the blood, sweat, and tears to build this hardware platform only to build an amazing software stack on top of it. I really hoped when I started that tools like these existed and we could innovate on top of them. And I just found out the hard way that they don't exist and we had to build it. But the software layer that sits on top of it, everything from the actual, UI to operate them, to the live stream capabilities, to the digital capture, to the social layer, are things that are really the exciting point of, because people are so familiar, comfortable, excited about what's happening in the digital creation space. And of course, there's the desire to move that into the physical, but it's moving into the physical in a natural way. And I want to preserve all the excitement in the digital space and just open it up. So I'm thinking about our tools, like let's say the software integration with the tools, as being like a studio, right? Where traditionally you have a studio. Sometimes you're not making anything; you're just sitting there staring at a painting for 6 hours. But it's the place where you go to have kind of your own sacred space where you can create your own world and you can enter into that room. And you might not be making anything, but when you're there, you're creating. You're in that headspace. And so, rather than just having a tool What I'm trying to do is turn that tool into a space where you can have total privacy and total, intense creation when you need it, and open it up for visitors and have a social layer on top of that, so you can find peers, find collaborators, of course, find um, buyers, for your work, and have the tool be literally a studio with all of the conventional attributes that a normal studio would have. And that's the scaling part. This is where we're starting to, in very simple ways, the initial UI that we're opening up is going to be operated and governed through a Discord server, and it has the ability as kind of verification, social, and easy access to the tools themselves, and we're going to build up from there. We want to get as many people that are excited about this using it as possible, as quickly as possible. So please don't hesitate to reach out. Tell anyone to reach out to us, DM us, Twitter, Instagram, email, what have you, and let's stay in. We will accommodate anyone literally as soon as we possibly can.
Well, there is your alpha, and it sounds like join the Discord is the moral of the story here. Is the Discord public?
It will be very soon. So we'll post information about that as soon as it's open, and there'll be one part that'll be open to the public. There'll be another one that will be limited access to the tools. But we're as we get progressively farther with our ability to scale, then we're gonna let people in. So we'll have kind of a waiting list for the tools.
Beautiful. And if anybody wants to ask a question here to Artmatr, the people at Artmatr, Ben and Oxai, this is a very wonderful opportunity. Feel free to put a request on stage. And before I turn it to Runetoon, just one question, Ben. It sounds to me then the scaling solution, which actually makes a ton of sense, is basically leveraging the digital. So create this virtual space. You get these virtual versions of how it would turn out if you were to make these physical, like a close approximation, I assume, of how things would turn out if you actually printed it. And then if you want to, spend the $500 or 1,000 or 5,000 or whatever it costs, 10,000, then you can do that based on your virtual studio. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Except for the fact that we really want to make it as cheap as possible. We don't want to have like a high. We designed this system specifically to make it as affordable as possible. If people want to get into more advanced tools, then maybe there'll be ways to do that. But the first stage is we want to open the platform, everyone to use to basically program the files to create the simulations for free, and then only charge when people actually go to plot or paint what we call matter the works.
Let me jump in there here quick, Ben. I mean, I think one of the amazing things that sort of integrating this with various blockchain tech can provide is that we can create a tokenized instruction set for our tooling that can be collected before the work is made. So the work can be made physical on demand. Or even there's, you can get into some of the mechanics of how tokenized art works, and you could buy and trade or, invest in and then sell a work before it is even mattered, as we say. So you'd have a token that would represent all of the instructions needed to create the physical piece that could be activated when you choose. But it could be, a patron could invest in an artist and collect a number of these tokens and then choose to hold them or sell them or matter them or do whatever you want with them. So there's some interesting mechanics and like sort of efficiencies that come in for the artist by tokenizing the work ahead of its actual creation.
So just to clarify, you're talking about tokenizing the matter, the process, because So like, I remember seeing a video of you guys working with Zancan, and I remember someone said, "Well, let's mint one of these." And I didn't really understand what that meant exactly. So there was like, I had a little bit of a confusion. Like I knew that you were taking Zancan and, you know, going digital to physical with that. But is that what you mean by using the blockchain for the matter?
Yeah, I guess what I mean is, let's say you're an artist and you're in a, say, sort of soft market like the one we're in now, and you've got this amazing body of work. You want to have physicals. You're not necessarily sure though. You want to spend, let's say $20,000 to create a dozen physical pieces, and then have to sell them or try to sell them, try to find collectors. But what you could do is create work within our simulation environment to create the works that you want to see in this body of work, and then tokenize that instruction set for each piece.
So
And then if
then,
an artist chooses to collect, then they would purchase the token, and then the smart contract would handle the revenue share between, let's say, the artist and Artmatr automatically, and the work would get sent to the hardware, and the hardware would be created, and we would have a physical piece for the collector.
so you could have the token available and the physical doesn't exist. And then the moment someone purchases the token, it creates the physical and it gets sent to whoever collected.
Yeah,
Am
or
I
yeah, or it wouldn't even have to necessarily be triggered by the condition of purchase. You could purchase the
gotcha?
token, and then
Interesting.
the secondary action would be required to trigger the physical creation. But then you could even speculate on or invest in or hold uncreated work that would just be a potential, right?
Gosh, there are so many different ways that, your company is creating new things. I remember when I saw the Matthew Stone, I started to look into you guys and I found out about the nouns and all the just various ways. I just saw like so many possibilities. And, this tokenizing the process is, I never would have thought of that. Very interesting.
The way I look at it from a more conventional perspective is that outside of people that fall squarely into digital art, every traditional artist virtually is using some kind of digital imaging in the way that artists use sketch pads 20, 30 years ago, right? These are all the studies. These are all the um, kind of like a code for a painting. And then often they go and they do all of the physical creation by hand. But the early stages, all the ideation, all the sketches are digital files. And using these tools, artists can see they can do something, really traditional artists can do things that are somewhere in between prints and paintings. It's sort of a new art form. But they have a market where they can do a lot more of these things that are all unique, but still sort of more akin to printing. And they have a new body of work that can be much lower price because of the volume and the speed using the automation. They have a totally different collector base for these types of works, but they need a mechanism to be able to both communicate, message this, and also sell. And that the tokenization of those digital files pre-fabrication or pre-mattering is brilliant because people can see examples of what the physical version looks like. The simulation doesn't have to be a perfect. In fact, we don't want it to be a perfect simulation of the ultimate outcome. Um, those are liquid assets that can be traded without all the complications of physical works, with the ability to then turn it into a physical painting at any point. And that's where I'm seeing both this connection between the Web3 community and traditional art happening in a really exciting way.
I think it's fascinating how much you guys are actually integrating blockchain into the whole model. It's because, in a sense, I would have thought almost like, well, is it even necessary? In a sense, there's been all these plotters before. But I think maybe it's, as you put it, it's like the marketplace. By creating a kind of marketplace, it sounds like you guys want to make, it's like the person who buys the work potentially, not necessarily, can fund the creation of the work so that the artist doesn't have to necessarily shell everything out to make this physical and then it gets sent over. It kind of removes all this in between business of, okay, we'll send that over to the artist. That's expensive. Maybe it doesn't sell, and this sort of thing. Is that kind of why you're using blockchain?
I mean, I think, that's one of the reasons, right? Like there's interesting, what smart contract tech allows us to do is come up with these sorts of, mechanisms or marketplace products for art. And I hope I'm not sounding like too clinical about the nature of production and consumption of art objects. But, I think anyone that's been in Web3 for a little while can see how the marketplace has incredible power, not just to put money in artists' pockets, but also increase the range of collectors and people having aesthetic experiences with digital art or physical art, for that matter. So I'm not trying to glorify or overemphasize the marketplace, but I think it's an interesting place to explore and find creative solutions that can expand the type of aesthetic experiences and relationships that are built between collectors and artists. So definitely, there's some territory there that we're looking forward to developing further. But also, it's as Ben said, this could be like on Shopify or something. It could be a very Web2 solution, or it could be something a little bit more traditional. But we think that the Web3 community has a lot to add to the conversation about what art collection, art production, and art experience looks like in the future. And so I think we'd be remiss not to, dive completely into the possibilities of that community and their creative field.
I totally agree. And the whole, for me, blockchain is still by far the most credible way of buying and selling digital art. So it kind of makes sense that you guys would integrate that into your, overall, for lack of a better term, business plan. And just a final thing on the process and this whole virtual studio, it sounds like there's a certain amount. You're mentioning Tyler Hobbs as being, very good at the whole programming on side of things. So how much interpretation is required? I just kind of assumed I'd send you the JPEG and you guys would get to work and I'd be like, I want a charcoal version and, there it is. And that'll cost you X dollars. It sounds like it's more complicated than that. And almost this virtual studio is kind of a way of training artists as well in how to do this. It's more complicated than sending a JPEG. Is that correct?
It's going to be a complex tool, and all tools inform their users in some way, right? But I think the idea is, and this is, it's still in beta and still being sort of developed in many ways. But the idea is to provide as much or as little creative involvement that participant might want to lend to the experience. So there may, for a larger set or a longer tail of users, there might be some predefined sort of style transfer things where, you show up, you can upload a JPEG, whether that's art created or, I don't know, a photo of your dog, right? And utilizing some of the ML tools that are out there, tools that we're building upon, find artistic interpretations, creative interpretations of that source file, and then press a button and you're go. Or you could dive deep into, the nuts and bolts of that translation layer between the digital file, whether vector or raster based, and how that becomes manifest through the end effectors, as we call them, the painting tools, whether that's brushes or pens or airbrushes or inkjet heads or all sorts of other things, charcoal holders and whatnot. So it's I've been a designer and fabricator for over a decade, and I really enjoy the dynamic and the exploration and the development of a dynamic between a user and a tool. And I think all artists tend to be people that have a similar mindset, right? Like you find a tool, whether it's a piece of software, whether it's a paintbrush or paint can or certain type of medium, and that the sort of exploration into the possibilities and the limits or the edges of that space is what drives the creative effort. And so we want to build something that is that kind of tool, something that people can pick up and just run with to get started, get excited about, but also dive deep into and start to explore the boundaries of.
Beautiful. And Benjamin, did you want to add any to that?
I think you nailed it. I just
Okay.
to clarify your point, it is possible to just come in with a JPEG or an SVG and pretty much like press go. But it is set up so the more sophistication, more interest people have in digging into some of the underlying code or more advanced kind of programming, they can do that as well. But it's designed initially for people to come in without any technical experience whatsoever, just imagination and interest.
I love it. And before I turn it over to Runtune, as we wrap up here in this unbelievably fascinating hour, so how far are we, Ben, from this all happening? In a sense, how far are we from someone in this space being able to utilize the technology that you guys are working on?
Believe it or not, we're opening the UI to a small beta group in the next few days, and so we will post information about that on our social channels and allow people to come in and witness the process and get on a list as beta users as we can open it up to more and more users.
Well, that is the greatest news I've ever heard, at least in the last week. So put on your notifications, follow Artmatr, and put on your notifications if you want to learn about that. Runtune, it sounded like you wanted to say something here. Take it away.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I do think that there's a huge appetite for this space between digital and physical that you guys are operating within. I know that as a traditional artist who didn't really get seriously involved with digital art until around 2021 or so, what attracted me to a lot of what I was seeing in the NFT world is kind of a new, digital art has always been around, but I hadn't really considered it as deeply or as seriously as I did paintings and traditional mediums. And when I started working as a digital artist, I wanted to kind of, I didn't want to make still images, or I didn't want to do things where it was just too closely related to the physical work I used to do. Uh, and so I took to animation and stuff like that. And I thought, what's a great way I could make this stuff, uh, easy to be appreciated by people who aren't so involved with NFTs or digital artwork. And it led me to consider projectors, digital screens. I know that there's this company, Infinite Objects, that makes really wonderful, aesthetically pleasing digital screens. And there was something about taking this art that's kind of stuck on a computer screen or stuck on your iPhone or whatever it may be, and bringing it into a physical world that I feel like will make it easier to be appreciated by people who have a hard time seeing digital art as being, um, authentic or something, or genuine art. And it's so when I first found out about you guys and saw all the wonderful work that you're doing, it led me to believe like it could be the tools that you guys are using, the processes you're doing. It could be as simple as send over the JPEG and they'll digitize it for you. But seeing that Matthew Stone was really impressive, and I just had no idea. It was just like a totally new medium, in my opinion. Or as Pocobelli said earlier, a new way of mark making. What are some of the other areas of digital to physical that you have yet to explore?
Obviously we're firmly in the realm of painting, right? Not object making, but we are interested. Well, not interested. We do have projects going on. They're a little secretive at the moment, but we're actually painting onto 3D objects, onto sculptures, onto shoes, on sneakers, lots of different objects. So there's moving painting outside of the canvas on into different areas. That's one thing. But purely in the on the painting side of things, the place that I personally, there's a lot of areas we're going. And by the way, part of the obvious reasoning for opening it up to a very broad group of creators is to get to do a huge amount of user research, to get feedback from the community, to see where they want to go, and that's where we'll take it. Like that's we want to go where the creators want to go. But I just would say personally, the area that I'm really fascinated in is this thing that Matthew Stone and people like him are pioneering, which is using a combination of 2D and 3D modeling environments, animation software, everything like Blender, Maya, C4D, and of course AI to build digital files in a way that they can be translated to the physical in a way that sort of parallels a more traditional process where you can fill in a background and then put in objects in the scenes and make complex shadows. All of these things that were literally the building blocks of traditional painting. Creating a scene and populating it with objects and people and what have you. The tools that have come available, like Blender, totally free, as powerful enough to make a feature film, right? You have it in your desktop. It's a world of possibility that not only for the animation 3D modeling space, but also for painting, and building out the capacity to go directly from those virtual 3D objects to canvas, I think is going to allow people very soon to make some of the most interesting paintings ever made. And again, like I don't think I'm in the realm of hyperbole. I really believe that that's true. And people are going to do this, make the best paintings ever made without ever picking up a paintbrush. And that is incredibly exciting to me.
I couldn't agree more. This is so incredibly exciting. Sorry, Rintun, did you say something?
I was just saying, I believe Benjamin. I do believe that it will be some of the most exciting. I don't even know if paintings would be the right word, but the most exciting new work.
Beautiful. Oxide, do you have any final thoughts before we turn to Ben and Rintun as we wrap this up? And I'm so grateful for your time, all of you. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Oxide, any final thoughts here?
Yeah. Well, one, thanks for letting us go over time. That's I know we could talk for hours. Obviously, I think it's pretty readily apparent that we have lots of thoughts and passionate ideas about all this. But I don't know if we touched on this before, but there's something that to me that's really interesting about the process of, and you mentioned this a little bit earlier, Adrian, about like the little YouTube videos or clips of the plotters that we put on Twitter, and people love seeing how this art comes into being. I mean, and that's not just plotter or robot created art, but obviously retrospectives of artists in museums and like seeing their process in their studios and learning more about how the work came into being. I think that narrative is really important to people's understanding and experience with art objects, and it's difficult with digital artists to display that in a way. It's like what you show someone staring hunched over their laptop for 48 hours or something like it's hard to see the work, or the work is like a little bit more occluded. And I think that one of the things that another part of the tokenization layer that we're building is a certificate of authenticity, which a lot of contemporary art has been exploring NFT tech to provide, but we see it as not just an enhanced version of like that piece of paper that you'd stick on the back of the painting with the signature, but rather something that can be a container to kind of encompass all of this additional content, whether that's videos or of the work being made, or simulations of the G code, or like some of the additional collateral that makes up this expanded art object. And I think that's kind of what Ben's pointing at too. Like art objects are not just the painting anymore. It's all of this additional work and digital studies and like explorations, and we want to showcase that. We want to provide that sort of additional narrative experience for collectors and viewers alike. So seeing this now in the art objects, which are not just digital, not just physical, but rather this sort of they occupy a field that that touches in both realms, that has space in both realms, and kind of like finding a way to containerize that complex thing and allow it to be shown and also collected and also experienced is something that we're really excited to do.
It's visionary. I think it's a brilliant idea. Or like, who wouldn't want to see how the artwork is made, particularly if you love that artwork? It's brilliant, of course. Brilliant, visionary. Benjamin, do you have any final thoughts for us?
I have about 412 final thoughts.
Feel free to share all of them.
Main thing is, we are deeply interested to hear from anyone. I just want to stress it. Anyone interested in the space, does not matter if you have background, technical knowledge, what have you. Whatever passion you bring to this, we really want to hear. So please don't hesitate for anyone to reach out with any questions. If there's something which is not clear, I guarantee it is my fault, not yours. There's no such thing as a stupid question. No, any sort of interest and passion we really want to hear. It's what moves us. It's also what helps us figure out how best to move forward. We want to know what people are excited about, either in the making or the viewing or the consuming, whatever it is. So please, that's my main thing. Don't hesitate to reach out.
Well, spoken as a true inventor and artist, this is a great opportunity, everybody who is here, as you know. You don't need me to explain that to you, because who knows how quickly and how huge. These guys are working with some of the biggest talents in the world and, for major works here. So again, very grateful. Runtun, any final thoughts?
No, thank you guys so much for coming on. I feel enormously privileged to have been able to have talked to you. And thank you, Pokebelly, for making this happen.
Well, and thank you.
Thank you. The pleasure is ours.
Yeah, absolutely, likewise. And maybe we check in 6 months or something. That would be wonderful. And your social media person is wonderful to deal with, I'd like to add. So thank her as well. And so thank you guys, Benjamin, Oxai, Runtun, and everybody who's listening for this fascinating hour here. Thank you so much. Until next time, take care.
Thank you. Looking forward.
Thanks all.